Delicious and fiery, Singapore's Sambal Stingray packs a punch. So join Renjie and me as we uncover what makes this spicy delight so famous and also find out where to find the best of this dish in Singapore. So Renjie, on the last episode, I left you with three things. One was seafood, one was spicy, and one was really local. So what are some dishes that come to your mind before I tell you what this episode is?
So the truth is I have no clue what you're talking about because there are many dishes that fit that criteria in Singapore.
Yeah.
So for instance, like when people think about Singaporean food, they think about chili crab. Ticks all of that criteria. Spicy, seafood, local. When I think about one of my favorite dishes, which is sambal morning glory, stir-fried morning glory, it fits that dish description as well because it's also spicy, it's also very local, and it does contain seafood in the sambal, which has a lot of dried shrimp in it.
Yeah.
So I have no idea what you're talking about.
You know, one of the cool things is anyone who's watching this, they will know what I'm talking about because they've seen the title of the episode. Right?
So I'm the only one in the dark
You're
here?
the only one who,
thanks a lot.
Like, who doesn't know what it's about. So it is about sambal, but it's
Okay.
not sambal morning glory. It's Sambal Stingray. It
Oh,
was
okay.
Like stingray for a food enthusiast like me from India is a very unique dish because
Yes.
in India you don't get stingray and you know that, right?
Yes.
You get stingray, but you don't really cook it the way it's done in Singapore.
It's actually a very interesting fish because it's, first of all, it's very commonly found in Southeast Asia. And it's also one of those fish that you must eat very fresh.
Yep.
Because the moment you leave it for a while, it starts to smell of like ammonia.
Oh.
Right? So you have to have really, really fresh stingray. And the way you prepare, actually, like the sambal that goes along with the stingray is specifically meant to kind of bring out the freshness and or maybe mask some of the, if any, fish, at least traditionally, the fishiness of stingray. But it's a beautiful dish. So I'm glad you mentioned it.
You know, like the first time I had it, I was also in for a surprise because I didn't expect the flavors to just burst in my mouth.
Yeah.
And a lot of that has got to do with sambal, right?
Yes.
And the way it is prepared.
Yeah.
So I know that many places in Singapore don't do it. But tell me a little bit about sambal and why it's so unique in the cuisine that you get in Singapore.
So sambal is a bit of an umbrella term, right? And it's a very Malay concept.
Okay.
Malays are the indigenous people of Singapore and of the broader sort of region. And it's essentially just a spice paste. It's a spicy spice paste, right? And there are many different kinds of sambals. Some of them are fresh, some of them are like cooked down. But specific to this type of sambal that they use in Sambal Stingray, because obviously every single dish has a slightly different sambal that you use. This one is cooked with tamarind. It's cooked down with a lot of shallots. It's cooked down with oftentimes, obviously dried chili, but also oftentimes a type of ginger flower that elevates a lot of that fragrance. And it goes very well with seafood. How would you describe, for instance, the meat of the stingray?
I would say really fresh because what you said at the start. I would say soft.
Yeah.
And you know how when you're having fish, for the uninitiated, you're just maneuvering around fish bones.
Yeah.
Right? Out here, this dish is you're just scooping out the meat, right?
Yeah. And so it's because of the type of fish that stingray is unlike a regular sort of bone structure of a fish. What you're actually eating are the fins, so the huge, the wings, I guess, of a stingray. And because of that, essentially, you're scooping out a lot of this just pure meat off of what is essentially the fins. So there's no bones per se, you're just scooping out the meat. And the meat, like you say, is really tender. It's also really flaky in a meaty way, so it's delicious when you pair it with a sambal.
Wow, like all of that chatter really makes you want to go to Singapore just to try this again.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that because we're doing this episode. It just reminded me of the first time I tried.
Let's do it.
Now, what are some of the places where you should go to if you want to try a Sambal Stingray?
Ooh. This is, again, as always, a very controversial and dangerous topic. You're going to get me into trouble with a lot of Singaporeans. But I will say that the place that I think about when I do Sambal Stingray is Newton Hawker Centre. If you've watched Crazy Rich Asians, it's the hawker centre that's featured in there. It's also one of my favorite hawker centres in town. And there are a bunch of seafood stalls there that do excellent sambal stingray, but the one that I always gravitate towards is Alliance. I've been going there for years. It also has, it's on the Michelin guide, if that matters to you or anyone. But they do wonderful sambal stingray. They grill it on a banana leaf, and it's on a charcoal stove, so it's charred. You get the fragrance of the banana leaf. They serve it also with calamansi, which is a type of Southeast Asian citrus, a little bit like a tiny orangey nimbu, if that makes sense, but just spectacular. So that's what I associate sambal stingray with in Singapore.
And do you have it with rice or not rice?
You know, you don't have it with rice.
Okay.
You can have it with rice. I'm sure it's going to be amazing. And I'm sure some people do. But how at least I do it is because you're eating it in a hawker center, you don't usually eat it at home. You eat it in a hawker center, you end up ordering a whole bunch of different dishes, a table full of dishes. So, you know, you have grilled chicken wings, and you have oyster omelette, and you have a sambal morning glory stir fry. You have all these different dishes. So they're kind of both main dishes and side dishes simultaneously at the same time, if that makes sense. But that is the logic of eating out in a hawker center in Singapore, is just maximizing as much calories and flavor as you possibly can.
Awesome. I think that's a good way to end this episode on Sambal Stingray.
Yeah.
Now, the next episode, I want to talk about something that for an Indian traveler sounds like Roti Paratha. But when you see it on menus in Singapore, it's Roti Prata.
Confusing.
So, what are 3 terms or words that you would associate Roti Prata with?
I will say breakfast, for sure. Supper also, actually.
Okay, so breakfast and supper.
Exactly. And the last one is probably technical. It's a very technical dish.
Really?
Yes.
Well, let's find out on the next episode what it's about.
We'll explain that
I'm
more.
quite interested to know why it's a technical dish.
Amazing.
Awesome.